I've been watching your videos for a long time. Been a big fan of yours. One thing I will say is that I have come out here not only because I turned conservative in about 2016 with Trump's first run. I've always also been a devout atheist, and I've been proud in my beliefs with that. I find the the Bible, to be a very fictitious book. I find that it has a lot of contradictions that are not squared away.
This video caught my attention for a couple of reasons. First, because there is no crazy like celebrity crazy. For the benefit of my friends not in the United States, that is Charlie Kirk. We'll get to his bio in a bit. Next, I wanted to focus on the fact that not all atheists are good people. And I don't say that because he's a MAGA, although that was one strike against him. I have his shirt covered because it's offensive. His jacket covers a few of the words on the shirt, such that I had to look up what the rest of the meme was. But once I saw it, I didn't want to subject you to it. If you are curious, go to the original video. Otherwise, just trust me. It's offensive, and I don't want to feature it. I have to wonder about this guy if he just likes ticking people off. He's an atheist and offending most of the MAGAs, and Charlie here for that fact, and he wears a shirt that will tick off anyone with human empathy and lands in a camp all by himself. The title of this video is Charlie Kirk Debates an Atheist on God's Existence. Given the caliber of the atheist we have here, I'd put my money on Charlie to win the debate. If it even is a debate. But does either side have a convincing case? Let's have a chat. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me, and especially to my patrons and channel members. Stick around to the end and see who got 50 points from last week's video. Charlie Kirk calls this a debate. I would not. There were no rules, no time limits, no moderator. But if he wants to call it a debate, we'll go with it. What I find most telling is Kirk's posture and demeanor as the atheist speaks. He's about as engaged in this as a rock, probably pulling up a pre-scripted response from memory. Kirk is on his American Comeback Tour, which is ongoing. Kirk founded Turning Point USA for educational and charitable purposes, so it can be a 501c3, to empower informed civic and cultural engagement grounded in American exceptionalism and a positive spirit of action. They want to restore traditional American values like patriotism, respect for life, liberty, family, and fiscal responsibility. It is a national student movement dedicated to identifying, organizing, and empowering young people to promote the principles of free markets and limited government. Their goals and the current administration seem to be at odds with each other. Trump's tariff war is limiting, not promoting free markets, limiting women's right to choose, limiting the availability of gender-affirming care, limiting free speech, eliminating DEI programs, all working to limit personal freedoms, not promote them.
Tell the High Advisor that we request to dispense with the welcoming ceremonies.
If this is the Live Free Tour, as Kirk promotes it, he should be encouraging students to protest the current administration's attacks on personal freedom. But we all know that the only freedom that Kirk wants is the freedom to impose his values on everyone else. In other words, freedom for me, but not for thee. Kirk has no education to speak of. He dropped out of Harper Community College to become a full-time activist. He persuaded Foster Friess to finance his organization. I'm not sure if Friess made billionaire status. He gave conflicting reports, but if not, he was close. He was one of the largest donors to the Republican Party until his death in 2021. Let's see what our well-funded, uneducated youth has to say about the existence of a God. But first, we'll let the atheist finish his question.
One thing I want to get for you before we dive into that is, how can we get more people of different faiths to come to the conservative movement instead of, because a lot of what I see of you is espousing on Christian virtues and to a lesser extent Jewish, but I think that there could be a lot more that we could do with ideas rather than the beliefs of religion.
The atheist has a good point. If there was value in conservatism, then that value should be for all, not just the Christians. I'm with the atheist on wanting to divorce the idea that Christian means Republican or vice versa. There are plenty of Democrats that are Christians. Are people who aren't Christian welcome in the Republican Party or the conservative movement?
Let's start with the idea of atheism, if that's okay.
Sure.
And Kirk completely ducks the question. Unfortunately, the atheist has given up on his question and allowed Kirk to steer the conversation, or debate as he calls it.
I'm going to go through all of the arguments for God's existence.
Okay.
I want you to tell me if you've heard them before or if they are compelling.
Okay.
First is what's called the ontological argument for God, which ontos comes from the Greek. It's the Greek word for being.
Sure.
So the highest conception of human beings, we can only conceptualize that which is real.
False. I can conceive of Santa Claus. Santa is not real. I can also conceive of fairies, unicorns, dragons, leprechauns, trolls, the Easter Bunny, and so forth, and none of these are real. Okay. In one respect, trolls are real. Joey, I'm looking right at you now.
And so the highest conception of our own, combined wisdom is God. I think this is the weakest argument for God, to be perfectly honest.
Right, and I'll agree with you there, yeah.
Yeah, but it is a proof that on an ontological view of God.
Anselm devised this in the 11th century, which argues, it is a conceptual truth, or true by definition, that God is a being which none greater can be imagined, that is, the greatest possible being that can be imagined. God exists as an idea in the mind. A being that exists as an idea in the mind and in reality is greater than a being that exists only as an idea in the mind. Thus, if God exists only as an idea in the mind, then we can imagine something that is greater than God, that is, a greatest possible being that doesn't exist. But we cannot imagine something that is greater than God, for it is a contradiction to suppose that we can imagine a being greater than the greatest possible being that can be imagined. Therefore, God exists. But premise 3 is false. Existence doesn't add greatness to a thing. If a God is great, her existence has no bearing on her greatness. Thus, the classic version of the ontological argument fails. Unfortunately, our atheist friend here has made no counter-argument.
I think this is the weakest argument for God, to be perfectly honest.
Right, and I'll agree with you there, yeah.
Yeah, but it is a proof that on an ontological view of God. The second of which is called the cosmological view of God, coming from the Greek word cosmos, which means all-encompassing creation.
Sure.
If you look around with creation, there are 15 fine-tuned measurements that if anyone went off by a micron, our entire existence would not exist. The tilt of the earth, our proximity to the sun, our configuration of oxygen to carbon dioxide. In fact, we can look at the probability of our existence. It's 1 in multiple trillions.
Kirk can't even get his arguments straight. The cosmological argument says that there must be a first cause, as its negation would lead to an infinite regress. The most common form of the argument that we hear is the Kalam. Kirk calls this the cosmological argument, but iterates the fine-tuning argument. If you missed my conversation with astronomer Dr. Kelsey Johnson, give it a view. We don't talk directly about the teleological argument, which the fine-tuning argument is a specific form of, but we do discuss the 4 fundamental forces of nature, their possible origin, whether they could be different, could life form if they were different, and so on. As to Kirk's argument, were I this atheist, I'd first ask him how he has established that life cannot exist in other conditions, deny that the conditions need to be so precise, point out that there are billions of planets in the universe that have those conditions, and we have no idea if there are other universes out there. If there are billions of universes, that one would have intelligent life, since such a thing is obviously possible, present company excluded, it would be inevitable.
You're always right. It was inevitable.
Finally, even if this universe were designed, it clearly was not designed for us to live in it. We occupy a microdot in the cosmos, and only a very small part of our planet is even fit for human habitation. A better argument could be made that the universe was designed, if it was designed, for tardigrades, which can live in far more extreme conditions than humans can. Is Kirk's God a tardigrade? And of course, if the universe were designed, there is no reason to think that it was a god that designed it. It could just as easily have been an adolescent alien who botched a science project. Again, see my conversation with Dr. Johnson for the full context of that idea.
That all of this would come together at an exact time, let alone consciousness, let alone human beings, let alone our DNA.
Sure, I want to counter that with the fact that there are millions upon millions of galaxies with millions upon millions of their own stars, with millions and millions of their own planets. If we didn't, I don't think that if this Earth was not in this exact space as it exists now, I think that is also not compelling, because we would have found existence on in another location in the universe if it was not just in this space.
I don't have enough faith to believe that.
Aw, poor Charlie.
Oh, poor baby.
Doesn't have enough faith to believe that if there wasn't life on this planet, that life could not have evolved on another planet that also has the necessary conditions for life. First, if the atheist has more faith than Charlie, who obviously watches too much Frank Turek,
I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.
and faith is a gift of God, then the atheist was gifted with the greater faith by a God that doesn't want people to believe in it. If Charlie really believes that faith is a virtue, he should follow the example of the more virtuous atheist here and deny his God's existence, as, if his God exists, that is what he truly wants. Which makes far more sense than Christianity. It sure explains the divine hiddenness problem. God isn't found because he doesn't want people wasting their time, money, and effort on worshiping it. Go help your fellow man instead. If this God exists, I'd be cool with that. Second, we don't know that this hasn't already happened. There could be intelligent life on another planet that we just haven't found yet. There could be intelligent life on another planet that has already reached extinction before we began looking for ET life. Or there could currently be ET life on another planet that isn't capable of hearing our signals, or is hearing them but is unable to reply in a way that we find meaningful. If Charlie can't see this, his problem isn't a lack of faith, it's a lack of imagination.
But let me continue onwards. Then there is what's called the teleological argument for God. That comes from the Greek word telos, which means, we get the word telescope. It means goal, destination, or purpose. This here goes to an argument that for every cause, for every effect, there must be a cause. So, for example, we can agree that space, time, and matter exist. We agree.
Yes.
Therefore, definitionally, something that is outside of space, time, and matter must have made space, time, and matter exist.
Don't you just hate it when you have to tell the excusologists what their position is? Sorry, Charlie.
Sorry, Charlie.
That isn't the teleological argument. This is the cosmological argument, sort of. You didn't even get the argument right. It's supposed to be that everything that begins to exist has a cause, therefore the universe has to have a cause. You adding the part of everything needing to be made by something outside of the universe isn't part of the philosophical argument. Worse, your way of stating the argument is logically impossible. Something outside of time cannot create time. So no, definitionally, something outside of space, time, and matter did not make space, time, and matter. Before time is an incoherent concept. Nothing can happen outside of time, as time must exist for an action to occur. If a God can create time at a time when time does not exist, then such a God must also be able to create a rock so big that it cannot lift it, and create beings that do no evil, despite having free will. If your God can break the rules of logic to act outside of time, then he should also be free to break the rules of logic within our universe. Next, space and time are one. They're inextricably linked. If time cannot be created from outside of time, then neither can space. Let's see how the atheist answers this one.
Not necessarily. We can there
Well,
could
then
be
it's against
something.
the laws of reason.
Not because there could always be a universe that existed before our Big Bang. It's not. We could have existed with space, but no matter in a very tiny point. That's what basically the Big Bang was. So I don't see how that disproves atheism. And it's more atheism is more of a I don't believe God exists. Why is this compelling?
Oh well, he tried. If only Stephen Woodford, Paula Gia, Emma Thorne, Trolley Dave, or anyone with reasoning skills had been here instead of this guy.
Well, I'm going to go through two
Yeah,
more proofs
okay,
of God,
sure.
and then we'll finish. Then there's what's called the column proof of time, which is thanks to Albert Einstein, we know that time is actually a real thing that can be traversed with enough speed. And in order for time to exist, something timeless must have created it.
Really, Christians? Really, MAGA? This is the best you can do? Now, I realize that the atheist here is doing a poor job of defending his position, but don't forget, he didn't intend this conversation. This isn't even close to the question he brought up. He didn't come here to debate philosophy, but Charlie did. And he's butchering the arguments so badly, one would think that someone in the audience would correct him. Anyone?
Anyone, please send me anyone.
The kalam is a form of the cosmological argument. The proof of time argument is McTaggart's proof of the unreality of time, which argues for the B theory of time, stating that all things are past, present, and future simultaneously, rather than the A theory of time. Because if time were real, all things would need to be either past, present, or future. Since a thing can be future at one point, present at another, and past at another, therefore time cannot be real. Most philosophers reject this argument. Charlie's iteration that time must be real because Einstein proved it to be so is incorrect. Einstein's theory of relativity tells us that time depends on your frame of reference. But I will agree with Charlie that time is real. It is our fourth dimension, the other three being dimensions of space. I will disagree that because time exists, something timeless must have created it. I don't know if Charlie thinks that this is something that Einstein said. He kind of ran that all together as if it's supposed to go together. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he knows that this part doesn't belong as part of Einstein's work, as surely he knows that Einstein didn't believe in a personal creator, doesn't he? On the other hand, once we remove Einstein as his source, he's left with making this part of the argument up, which actually is what he's been doing all along, as he keeps botching all of the arguments.
Finally, there's something called the axiological view of God. I don't know if you know this one. Axios comes from the Greek word judgment. Axios and judgment mean the same thing.
I have to wonder if the atheist is saying, sure, sure, to get to the end of Charlie's speech so that they can actually get to his question, or if he's trying to appear to have known this despite Charlie pulling it out of his backside. Because, once again, despite Charlie's confidence about being right, he isn't. Axios is from the Greek, but it means worthy or having weight. The Greek for judgment is chrysios, and sorry if I butchered the Greek. My Greek is no better than Charlie's, but at least I know enough to look it up and not just claim to know Greek roots that I don't know. Okay, Charlie, since you don't know what axios means, will you correctly get the axiological view of God?
Which basically means that every human being has some form of right and wrong embedded in us.
Once again, Charlie has botched it. The axiological view of God isn't an argument. It asks the question, what impact does God have? It assumes neither the existence nor the non-existence of God, but rather evaluates the effect of the existence that a God would have on the world, and the effect that the non-existence of God would have. And then it allows one to decide which is better, a world with or a world without God. Charlie has confused the argument from conscience with the axiological view of God. In his attempt to sound intelligent by using philosophical terms, he instead displays his ignorance of his own subject matter.
For example, when the Nuremberg trials were happening, the Nazis were not able to say, well, it was just the laws of the land. They actually appealed to a higher power, saying that every one of us had some good or evil within us.
No, that is not what happened at all. They argued that they were following orders, not that their God had ordered them to do this, but that they were following the chain of command in the army. They were following their human leaders. If they had made the argument that Charlie is claiming, then they would have been claiming that God told them to do it, or that God put evil in them to do it. Is that really the argument you want to make? Seriously? Let's see you even come up with a single testimony that made this claim. If they had, could anyone have taken it seriously? How does Charlie not see how foolish this would have appeared then, and how foolish it still sounds now? Rather, they argued that they were following the orders of their commanders. It's why the military code allows for disobedience of an unlawful order. No soldier should be committing crimes because he, she, they are ordered to do so. What Charlie is trying to argue is that all humans have a moral compass, and he thinks that therefore it must have been put there by a God. Charlie also has bad ideas. Does he think his God gave him those as well?
Okay, so that doesn't. I mean, that kind of disproves, right? I mean, if the Nazis were able to point to something outside of themselves and say, hey, this is the reason why we're doing this crap.
They didn't. No, the point is the Nazis didn't.
Okay.
Is that the people doing the trial did. Meaning the Nazis were not able to excuse that.
Okay.
Finally, a bit of pushback from the atheist. Charlie's comeback is it was the prosecutors that were claiming that the criminals at Nuremberg had evil in them. Let's listen to what you said again.
For example, when the Nuremberg trials were happening, the Nazis were not able to say, well, it was just the laws of the land. They actually appealed to a higher power.
Sorry, Charlie. You did indeed make the claim that it was the criminals appealing to a higher power, not the prosecutors. Goodness, you not only botch your own arguments, you can't even keep straight for 30 seconds what you said. But let's be charitable and assume that Charlie misspoke and didn't realize it.
So out of all those proofs of God, what if any of them are persuasive to you?
None.
None? Okay.
Good for you. He didn't make a single coherent argument, so none of them should have been persuasive. Are we now going to get to the question?
So then if you look at a human being and you look at the improbability of our, how we are put together, do you believe that we are largely an accident of multi-billions of years of evolution?
Yes. How do we know? How do we not know that how do we know that there isn't something that's identical to us on another, planet somewhere that we haven't encountered yet? It's just a skeptic in me that's thinking that way. That says, hey, maybe there's something out there that we haven't contacted yet that is in another galaxy or another planet or something that we just don't know about.
Or maybe there isn't.
The two of them have been talking past each other. Charlie isn't engaging with the atheist talking point, entirely putting off the question, and the atheist doesn't see that Charlie has presented 4 botched arguments. And when the atheist says he isn't buying any of them, Charlie brings up a 5th point, the complexity of life, which the atheist whiffs.
Missed it by that much.
By bringing up life on other planets or in other universes. Life on other planets or in other universes addresses fine-tuning and possibly the origin of the universe, depending on whether or not this life created ours. But it doesn't address complexity, which absolutely can come from billions of years of evolution. Not only can it did.
Okay.
So the improbability, though, of our existence and the Earth and oxygen and carbon and nitrogen and all of it together, you don't marvel at a human being being able to heal itself when it's cut.
I absolutely do, but I get why Charlie has gone here. When I stopped believing, I was afraid to go outside as I didn't think I could marvel at nature the way I had as a believer, marveling at all that God had made. But when I did go out, I found the opposite to be the case. I marveled all the more at all that has come to be through natural processes. I find nature to be fucking awesome. It's far more impressive than a wizard creating it from an incantation. That all of this could evolve from one-celled simple forms is amazing, Charlie. Expand your mind, Charlie. Don't you think that if everything in the world evolved naturally to be the way it is, that it would be absolutely amazing? Do you have an imagination, Charlie? If so, try it. Imagine that you are wrong and that everything evolved naturally. Pretty cool, isn't it?
Or grow to a...
No, because we're not the only beings on Earth that can do that. There's a lot of people.
Well, we are the only ones that can reason.
Again, I'm disappointed in the atheist that he is focused on such a small part of the talking point, but I also get it. He wasn't prepared for this conversation. I am. I get the advantage of looking up what Charlie is saying. It's also really hard to come up with talking points on the spot when you are unprepared. If any of you saw me on Khalil Safir's channel 3 weeks ago, this is why I was upset with him for changing the topic on the air. He picked the topic. I prepared for the topic. He then changed the topic just 5 minutes into the show and wanted me to address a different topic, one I had not prepared for. So while I'm disappointed with the performance of the atheist, I also get it. He didn't ask for this. He asked for a different topic.
Okay.
Do you marvel at our capacity to reason it? Even the ability for mammals or reptiles to reproduce life. You don't see any intelligent design behind it.
None.
You just see
None.
it as
It's a consequence of natural selection and evolution over millions and probably millions of years.
Good answer. Humans also are not the only animals capable of reason. It's possible that slime mold, which doesn't even have a brain, might be capable of making choices, implying the possibility of reasoning. If it does, then even having a brain isn't required for one to make reasoned choices. How amazing is that?
So we both have faith.
Okay.
I would argue you have a lot more faith than I do. You have a lot more blind faith to believe that everything around you, love, joy, peace, sadness, is all just a construct of neurons firing in your brain.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Not only is the atheist right, but it's even demonstrable. With MRIs, we can map the firing of neurons that happen when one is sad, happy, feeling love, and so forth. These really do happen when neurons fire in your brain. And again, if Charlie's problem is a lack of faith, which I don't think it is, I think it's a lack of imagination and reasoning. But if it were a lack of faith, all he would have to do is ask his God, who would simply supply him with the faith that he needs. And since his God seems to want him to be an atheist, he can get enough faith to be an atheist.
So do you believe that we are just limited to our five senses?
No, I think even science has said that there can be like a sixth sense of...
What is that sixth sense?
Like a sixth sense that can be aware of what's surrounding the body. That, like, I can know that there's another person next to me or there's a microphone in front of me. I can sense that. I don't need to have my eyes... Or I could be blind and I could still know that was there. I mean, I didn't need... I use more than five senses. Science has told us that for decades, that we have more than five
What do you
senses.
think happens when you die?
Not sure if Charlie moved off this point because he didn't get the answer he wanted, or if he realized that they weren't on the same page. I think where Charlie wanted to go was having the atheist say that we don't know anything we don't learn from our five senses. But I think he meant to ask if the supernatural exists. If that's the question he intended, the atheist answer was a good one. Our five senses and the supernatural are not a dichotomy. But since Charlie moved on, we'll never know where he meant to go.
Nothing. Our electronic impulses just stop firing and
Let me ask you
nothingness.
the most important question.
Okay.
I would have gone into the circle of life. We die, we decompose, we feed the plants feed the animals, and just as we didn't exist before we were conceived, we don't exist as people after we are dead.
Do you hope you're wrong?
Not really.
Another good answer. Charlie doesn't look like he's buying this. I get that too. Until I heard Paulogia talk about how awful eternal existence would be, I had always thought it was a good thing. But even a good thing gets tiresome when it goes on for too long. And an eternity of having to praise a God and tell him how wonderful he is sounds like hell. I didn't always think that, but I pictured doing a lot of different things in heaven, not just praising God. I had never considered that the reason life is precious is that it is finite. If it were infinite, it would no longer have value.
No, I mean, I've got
So,
this.
so,
it-
you,
it-
so
I
you don't
think-
you don't desire an afterlife.
I consider this life as an atheist the more compelling than even when I was younger and when I was religious, because I think that this is the only life we have. We need to do with it what we can, the best that we can do it, and it's like I said, it's just the one chance we got. We don't have an afterlife. We don't have anything after that. So our goal is to become the best people that we can possibly be in that one chance that we get.
Good answer. The way I say it is, live your life. It's the only one you have.
Okay, I will be stunned.
Cool. Charlie is stunned. Or he will be stunned. I'm not sure when. Guess he's never had a conversation with an atheist before.
So you hope that there's no eternal judgment and you never see your loved ones after you die.
No, not really.
Yes, I hope there is no eternal judgment. Why would I want an eternal judgment? Christianity is supposed to be all about saving you from eternal judgment. If we need saving from this eternal judgment, then eternal judgment is not a good thing. If it were a good thing, no one would need to be saved from it. If it isn't a good thing, why would anyone want it? For that matter, why would a good God be doing it? Worse, if it's all about damning people to hell, why would anyone want that? Seriously, Charlie, do you want that? Do you enjoy seeing people get tortured? Is that fun for you? Since Charlie is a Frank Turek follower, do you want to see your God torture babies for fun? Would that not mean that your God is evil? As to seeing loved ones after I'm dead, it really doesn't matter what I want now, does it? If I am dead, I can't want anything. I'm dead. If there were an afterlife, no, I would not want to see my loved ones. Most of them would be in hell. And no, I don't want to see anyone tortured in hell, especially not my loved ones.
I hope you all internalize just how dark that is, how sad that is.
That is neither dark nor sad. What is dark and sad is wanting to see people tortured for eternity. It doesn't get any darker or sadder than that.
And it's fine, I'm not trying to criticize you. We as Christians have hope that we are going to see our loved ones again, and that we will be in heaven, and that we will be in perfect peace, and that this is not it. In fact, there's something even better awaiting us.
You think that for yourself, but not for everyone, and not even for all of your loved ones. Some of your loved ones will be in hell by your theology. The vast majority of humanity will be in hell by your theology. Why do you desire so much suffering and death? Have you considered the possibility that your theology is wrong? Is there any point of theology about which you could be wrong? I'm guessing you would say yes to that one. Is there any point about which you cannot be wrong? And if so, what point would that be? People of other faiths are as strongly convinced that you are headed for hell as you are that you are going to heaven. If they are right and you are headed to hell because you have the wrong theology, are you still looking forward to eternal judgment? Are you still looking forward to seeing your loved ones in that afterlife, if that means sharing an eternity in hell with them? Which is why the only reasonable conclusion is that if there is an afterlife, what you think about any god or gods has no bearing on that life. If what you think about a god determines your eternal destination, and that god does not make that painfully obvious, and no, Charlie botching arguments for God is not a god making any kind of message clear. If the choice is not made painfully obvious by the god wanting people to make the choice, the god is evil. Charlie, do you worship an evil god?
So I hope one day that you do seek to find something higher and better, that this is not all for us in our existence. Thank you so much.
Fair enough, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's the end. This debate was Charlie ducking the question that he was asked in order to talk about what he wanted to talk about, and then him botching all the arguments for God. This is what a lack of education can do to a person. If this was a debate, the atheist won, to my surprise. He laid out the topic, and Charlie never touched it. Imagine winning a debate just by stating the topic. Charlie, do you want to include other faiths in your movement? Or is it Christians only? Is your group a Christian nationalist organization? If you were to achieve all of your goals, would there be room in the country for anyone that isn't just like you? Or is a clone army the goal?
magnificent, aren't they?
Don't be like Charlie. Finish school, never stop learning, and live your life. This week, 50 points to Rich Woods 23, Mad Computer Scientist 1, and Sinister Porpoise. The points don't mean anything, so do with them what you will. And also, a fresh hot chocolate chip granny cookie for a recent super chat goes to Kaina Tiona. Thank you for your support.